Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to the Pic-a-Flic podcast, a series that features reviews of film and sometimes TV that varies from old to new, and is all broken down the best way that I, your host, the Western Wonder, knows how. This episode is not a review per se, but rather a list, one that I've been wrestling with for the past couple of weeks, but I finally made my decision on how to go about this. I'll be breaking down 10 of my most anticipated movies of the year 2025. With a few honorable mentions that I'll get to after mentioning my top 10, and I'll go through the movies in alphabetical order. So, without further ado, let's get right into things. Kicking things off as my first entry is Captain America: Brave New World, set to release on February the 14th. I'm not exactly a die-hard knowledgeable fan of anything Marvel or DC, but if a film sticks out to me from either universe, I'm willing to give it a shot. And furthermore, I love to support newer hires, and this guy they got for the new Cap is great, but I can't seem to recall his name. Yo, Slim Shady, could you refresh my mind?
This guy's a gangster. His real name's Clarence. And Clarence lives at home with both parents. And Clarence's parents have a real good marriage.
Yeah, that's right. It's Clarence. But on a serious note, I'm very interested to see Anthony Mackie take on the role of Captain America full-time, and Harrison Ford as the Red Hulk, who's really red, and Giancarlo Esposito also being involved interests me, so it's looking to be a good time. I'm hoping Marvel can get another banger on their hands for West this year. My second entry is Guillermo del Toro's take on the classic Frankenstein. Release date unknown, as this is Netflix releasing this, and you may be familiar with how they handle their release dates. Anyways, this cast attached is pretty interesting. You have Oscar Isaac set to play Dr. Frankenstein, Jacob Elordi as the monster, and Mia Goth as the monster's bride Elizabeth, with additional support from Christoph Waltz, Lars Mikkelsen, and Charles Dance. I've been digging all the monster movies lately. Nosferatu was sensational, for example, so I'm very excited to see what Mr. Del Toro does with his adaptation. I have a feeling that it'll be a beautiful sight visually at least. My third entry is Golden, set to release on May the 9th. This is a coming-of-age musical dramedy film that's loosely inspired by the childhood of the musician and producer Pharrell Williams, who grew up in Virginia Beach. Once again, the cast is extremely promising here. You have Kelvin Harrison Jr., Halle Bailey, Divine Joy Randolph, Brian Tyree Henry, Janelle Monáe, Missy Elliott, Andre 3000, Anderson .Paak, and Quinta Brunson. Now that's an all-star roundup of talented individuals that I'm interested to see in one setting. I don't know much about Pharrell's upbringing, but I do know that he makes some dope music, and that excludes Happy. That was good for about a month or two before the radio play and social media beat it to a pulp. My fourth entry is a biopic that has a lot of high expectations and pressure behind it, but I'm personally stoked to see what happens in it. The Michael Jackson movie, simply titled Michael, set to release on October 3rd. Considering the artist that's being profiled, this movie is looking to be one of the biggest titles of the year, one that its US distributor Lionsgate needs in their climate of film rollouts. I'm rather hazy on the topic of biopics, but then again maybe it's because of that one Queen biopic that has bothered me, a diehard fan, with several glowing inaccuracies. And these days, in the wake of said film, there's been 500 other biopics in the works. Name a random musical artist or actor and they probably have one in development. Bruce Springsteen, Dionne Warwick, Nat King Cole, Britney Spears, Madonna, The Beatles, 4 separate ones by the way. Even Steve Harvey has one in the works. And I think I have a potential candidate for his part.
What your ass say? Yeah.
But back on the MJ movie, I do have faith in the studio making this an immersive and factually accurate film. Antoine Fuqua is directing, and the cast is also booming. Michael's real-life nephew Jafar will be playing him, an amazing feat at that, while Nia Long and Coleman Domingo will portray his parents, Catherine and Joe. Other supporting actors attached include Miles Teller, the happily engaged Laura Harrier, and Lorenz Tate. A random tidbit here, but I hope they get to show some insightful and equally humorous bits of MJ in the studio, as there's been some various moments circulating in past years, ranging from his look of displeasure during the recording session for We Are the World to cutting up in the studio with Stevie Wonder. My fifth entry is Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, set to release on March the 7th. Based on a novel of the same name, Robert Pattinson stars as this guy who's basically a crash test dummy of sorts, who spawns a new body with most of his memories intact. I've been long awaiting Bong Joon-ho's next project since Parasite was released a few years ago, so I'm pretty excited to see where this movie goes, considering that I'm not very familiar with the original source material. Also, seeing multiple Robert Pattinsons interact has got to be quite interesting. Also starring in the film are Naomi Ackie, Stephen Yeun, Mark Ruffalo, and Toni Collette. My sixth entry is
The Monkey!
set for a release on February the 21st. This movie is based on a short story written by Stephen King, an author that's going to have a busy year of adaptations between this, The Life of Chuck starring Tom Hiddleston, and another film that is on my list that will be mentioned next. The film revolves around two twin brothers who must come to terms with their past, a series of violent deaths that occurred after discovering a toy monkey in their attic when they were younger. Osgood Perkins, the filmmaker behind the Nicolas Cage starring film Longlegs, is directing this film. Theo James is playing dual twin roles, and Elijah Wood and Tatiana Maslany star in supporting roles. Stephen King adaptations have been pretty promising prospects, and I've liked most of the films I've seen thus far, minus Mr. Harrigan's Phone. So I'm looking forward to checking this out and perhaps cover it later during Halloween season. My seventh entry continues the trend of Stephen King adaptations, and this time is Edgar Wright's adaptation of The Running Man, set to release on November the 7th. The film takes place in the future where a man enters in a game show where he deals with threatening mercenaries and killers for 30 days. I recall watching the original film adaptation with Arnold Schwarzenegger a few years ago and thinking, this is pretty cool, without realizing that it was a King adapted project, as I am more familiar with his horror things. Seeing this being made in present time should be interesting to see, but to be honest here, this cast is what has me hooked. Glenn Powell, Josh Brolin, William H. Macy, Michael Cera, Amelia Jones, Katie O'Brien, Daniel Ezra, Lee Pace, and, would you look it, is Mr. Booked and Busy himself, Coleman Domingo, who's playing the game show host role that Richard Dawson originated in the 80s film. Was Steve Harvey overlooked because he's hard at work on his own biopic?
Hell no! Hell no!
My eighth entry is filmmaker Ryan Coogler's first non-Marvel film directed since Creed in 2015 and is called Sinners, set for a release on April 18th. His new project reunites him with a star that's been with him ever since his first project, Michael B. Jordan, who tackles dual roles here. The plot is still relatively vague, but we do know this. It's a horror movie that takes place in the South circa the 1930s, and vampires may or may not be in the mix. Whatever happens, I'm pretty hyped to see this one, as you can never go wrong in a Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan collaboration. Also starring in the film is Delroy Lindo, Haley Steinfeld, and Jack O'Connell. My ninth entry is James Gunn's Superman, a fresh reboot for the series set to release on July 11th. I must regurgitate my previous sentiments on earlier entry Captain America by saying that I'm a casual Marvel and DC consumer who's all for giving new guys a chance, and David Cornsweet taking on the beloved titular role, and some scrub named Clark Kent I guess, is looking to be a pretty cool portrayal, so I'll keep an eye out for this one. Also starring in this film is Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, Nicholas Hoult as the really bald Lex Luthor, whom I read initially auditioned for the part of Superman, Edie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific, Nathan Fillion as Green Lantern, Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl, and Wendell Pierce as Perry White, who has double bookings with DC via this film as well as Marvel with the upcoming Thunderbolts movie. My 10th and final entry on this list is Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery, the third installment of the Knives Out franchise. Once again, as this is Netflix distributing this movie, the release date is not yet known yet, as well as the plot details. I like mystery-themed films, so I really gravitated towards the first one. The second, Glass Onion, was fine, not as strong as the first Knives Out movie in my opinion, so I don't know what to expect other than someone of importance found dead and a whodunit caper follows, if I were to predict what the plot is. Daniel Craig returns as Foghorn Leghorn's detective cousin Benoit Blanc with a new ensemble cast in tow. Glenn Close, Josh Brolin, Kerry Washington, Jeremy Renner, Kaylee Spaney, Josh O'Connor, Mila Kunis, and Andrew Scott amongst others. With my ramblings on the main 10 out of the way, here are some honorable mentions that will also be on my radar this year, also in alphabetical order. The Alto Knights, which will see Robert De Niro play two different mob bosses for the price of one. Yorgos Lanthimos' Begonia, starring Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons, which is a remake of the South Korean film Save the Green Planet. Him, a horror movie produced by Jordan Peele. Love Hurts, an action comeback vehicle for Ke Huy Quan. Roof Man, a movie that finds Channing Tatum as a fugitive on the run from the feds by, let me read this correctly, hiding in the roof of a Toys R Us store. The fourth SpongeBob movie, currently titled The Search for SquarePants. It can't be as rough as the previous one, or could it be? Wolfman, a new horror movie that actually releases this month, and an untitled Paul Thomas Anderson film which boasts a cast that includes Leonardo DiCaprio, Regina Hall, Sean Penn, Teyana Taylor, and Benicio del Toro. It's looking to be a pretty interesting year of film, and I'll try to cover some of these movies at some point on the podcast. And that about wraps things up. If you enjoyed this episode and you liked it being among the first to get notifications on when new reviews and episodes drop, be sure to subscribe to the pod wherever you listen to said shows, and tell a friend to tell another friend to check it out. Also, if you want to follow the show on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and in the event that TikTok may be gone this month, watch the space for a new social media spot, and follow us under the username handle at Pic-a-Flic Pod. That is at PICAFLICPOD. If review logging is your thing, then you may be familiar with Letterboxd, where you can find non-audio exclusive reviews I do under the aforementioned Pic-a-Flic Pod username handle, so be sure to follow me there if you use that platform. Once again, thank you all for tuning in for this episode. Until the next chapter, this is the Western Wonder, and I'm signing out. Peace.
Bye, have a great time.